Tonight, for the first time, President Joe Biden authorizing Ukraine to use long-range U.S. missiles to strike Russia.
Well, friends, this is serious news. U.S. allows Ukraine to use long-range missiles strikes into Russia. This is massive.
Targets inside Russia, something that the Americans seem to have been hesitant to allow, concerned that it might then prompt an escalatory response by Russia.
This is not a small matter at all, friends. We are living in troublous times. I got a few clips that I'm going to share with you in a moment. But again, New York Times is talking about Biden allows Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range U.S. missiles. Why is this such a big thing? Well, at the start of the war, American politicians have already said and stated from the very beginning that we will not use American weapons to fight this war against Russia, especially these types of missiles.
The shift marks a significant reversal of Washington's policy in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. For months, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been pushing to allow his country's military to use U.S. weapons to hit Russian military targets.
Now, the reason this is a huge thing, let me show you what these missiles look like. I have to go on X for this one.
President Joe Biden's administration is giving the green light to Ukraine to use U.S.-made weapons to strike deep into Russia. That's according to two U.S. officials and a source familiar with the decision. This military drill video shows the Army Tactical Missile Systems, or ATACMS, which have a range of nearly 200 miles.
So this is the long-range missiles. This is what they look like. This is out of control. This is the kind of stuff that really spills the war, turn things around for the worse. Washington Post: Biden approves Ukraine's use of long-range U.S. weapons inside Russia, reversing policy. The original policy was that this was not going to happen. There it is. Biden signing that paper, confirming that it is now okay. Think about it. This is during a transition in time. In the month of January, Biden will no longer be the president. So he's leaving behind a serious war for the next administration to contend with. This is a massive movement. Now, where does this apply prophetically? We're going to look at that in a moment. The weapons are likely to be initially employed against Russians and North Korean troops in defense of Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region of Western Russia, the official says. Mr. Biden's decision is a major change in U.S. policy. The choice has divided his advisors. And he went on to say, and his shift comes 2 months before President-elect Donald J. Trump takes office, having vowed to limit further support for Ukraine. This is going to escalate the war in the decisions that will have dire consequences. Now, we are told from President Mr. Zelenskyy today, many in the media are talking about the fact that we have received permission to take appropriate action, Mr. Zelenskyy said in his nightly address, but blows are not inflicted with words. Such things are not announced. The rockets will speak for themselves.
President Zelenskyy, thank you so much. Before you go, if you want to share, what keeps you going? Do you ever feel defeated?
I have a lot of power, but even feeling strong and have a lot of energy, it doesn't mean that we want to fight all our life, because the price is high, like I said, because the war takes the best of us, the best heroes, the best men, women, children. That's it. But we are not ready to give our freedom to this terrorist Putin. That's it. That's why we are fighting. That's it.
Lord have mercy. So what is going on here? Now, the cry is Trump allies warns Biden risking World War III by authorizing long-range missiles for Ukraine.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon.
No one anticipated Joe Biden will escalate the war in Ukraine during the transition period. This is as if he is launching a whole new war. Rick Grenell, Trump's former acting director of national intelligence, wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter, "Everything has changed now. All previous calculation are null and void. All for what? Politics." He went on to say, the military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure they get World War III going before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives. Gotta lock in those trillions, life imbeciles. Donald J. Trump, the president-elect's son, wrote on his way out of office, Joe Biden is dangerously trying to start World War III by authorizing Ukraine the use of U.S. long-range missiles into Russia, said Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. The American people gave a mandate on November 5th against these exact America last decisions.
Nevertheless, this is a stark warning to the West, the latest in a slew of such. Previously, Vladimir Putin had come out and said that if advanced Western missiles with great ranges are supplied to Ukraine and used against Russia for strikes deep into Russian territory, then those countries, the United States perhaps, or Great Britain or France, which supply Ukraine with extended range missiles, that they will be complicit in an attack on Russia. Russia has brushed off their arguments that they merely hand these weapons over. Russia says it has evidence, and there is no way that Ukraine can plan, launch, and use these weapons without without NATO troops being involved, without NATO technical staff being involved, without NATO intelligence and NATO satellites being involved. But this comes at a dangerous time, at a time when many Western leaders are saying, ignore Putin and Russia's warnings, supply Ukraine with these missiles, and undoubtedly, even though they won't change anything, undoubtedly, Ukraine, they believe, will be able to resist Russia further. An argument that both military experts and the Russian government have said is in itself senseless.
Now, watch the following videos, and then I'm going to share some final comments from the Word of God as well as from the Spirit of Prophecy to where this thing might be headed. Take a listen.
This war has shown the Ukrainians can do anything they set their minds to. Today, we show the Ukrainians you're not alone. You're not alone in this fight.
It's being reported this evening that President Biden has lifted restrictions on Ukraine using US weapons to strike deeper inside Russia. President Zelenskyy has been pushing Western allies to allow his forces to use the missiles. It's believed the decision could help shift momentum in the conflict.
In the updated version of the document, aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, but with the support of a nuclear state, is proposed to be considered as their joint attack on Russia. Russia will also consider the possibility of using nuclear weapons when receiving reliable information about a massive launch of means of aerospace attack and their crossing of our state border. This includes strategic and tactical aircraft, as well as cruise missiles and drones, hypersonic and other delivery vehicles. Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in case of aggression, including if the enemy, using conventional weapons, poses a critical threat.
The plan to strengthen Ukraine is the Victory Plan, which I presented to our partners. One of its key points is long-range capabilities for our army. Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions. But strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves. They certainly will.
U.S. President Joe Biden has authorized Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles for strikes deep inside Russia. This major policy shift comes after months of requests by Ukraine and just 2 months before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Trump has criticized Biden's strong support for Ukraine.
Deborah, it is a significant shift. It's something that President Zelenskyy has been calling for a long time.
It's a hugely important moment and a massive boost for the Ukrainians. Like you said, the Ukrainian president has been lobbying hard with the United States to try to get the US president to lift restrictions specifically on long-range missiles after months of deliberating over whether or not he was going to allow the Ukrainians to use these long-range army tactical missile systems. They are ballistic missiles launched from ground-based systems against targets inside Russia, something that the Americans seem to have been hesitant to allow, concerned that it might then prompt an escalatory response by Russia. But according to reports in the New York Times, the sudden decision by the North Koreans to join Russian forces on the battlefield at the moment inside Russia, fighting against Ukrainian troops that have seized parts of the Kursk region, that is the trigger for this decision by the United States. And now all eyes surely are going to be on other allies of Ukraine, the UK, for example, which has for a long time also been asked by the Ukrainians to allow its forces to use their Storm Shadow cruise missiles against targets inside Russia. The British have been more forward-leaning, more seemingly willing to allow the Ukrainians to use these weapons, but had been waiting for a decision by the United States. Now that seems to have come.
Дни мы видим и слышим, как на очень высоком уровне Великобритании и США муссируется тема о том, что киевский режим сможет наносить удар вглубь территории России западными вооружениями большой дальности. И, судя по всему, это решение либо вот-вот будет принято, либо, судя по всему, вообще уже принято. И эта вещь, конечно, экстраординарная. Хотел вас попросить прокомментировать то, что происходит.
Происходит попытка подмены понятий, потому что речь не идет о разрешении или запрете киевскому режиму наносить удары по российской территории. Он и так наносит с помощью беспилотных летательных аппаратов и другими средствами. Но когда речь идет об использовании высокоточного оружия большой дальности западного производства, это совершенно другая история. Дело в том, что я уже об этом говорил, и любые эксперты это подтвердят, и у нас, и на Западе, наносить удары современными высокоточными системами большой дальности западного производства украинская армия не в состоянии. Она не может этого делать. Это возможно только с использованием разведданных со спутников, которыми Украина не располагает. Это данные только со спутников или Евросоюза, либо на Соединенных Штатах, в общем, с натовских спутников. Это первое. Второе, и очень важное, может быть, ключевое, заключается в том, что полетные задания в эти ракетные системы могут, по сути, вносить только военнослужащие стран НАТО. Украинские военнослужащие делать это не могут. И поэтому речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создавать.
It's no secret that I'm leaving office in January.
И мы же двигаемся к НАТО, а НАТО двигается к нам. Поэтому говорить о том, что Россия ведет себя агрессивно, по меньшей мере не соответствует здравой логике. Мы что ли пришли на границу куда-то? К нам же подошла инфраструктура НАТО.
President Putin actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That was what he sent us. And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO close to his borders.
Flashback.
This is fundamentally not about NATO expansion.
It was never about NATO enlargement.
It's not about NATO. It's not about NATO expanding toward Russia.
This was never about NATO.
It's absolutely nothing to do with NATO expansionism.
And it has nothing to do with NATO.
This is not about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
It's not really about NATO.
This is not about NATO.
Seriously, it's not about NATO.
This was never about NATO.
It was never about NATO. Let's be honest.
This doesn't have anything to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with NATO at all.
Yeah, he's claiming it's like security purposes, but we can see the clear reason.
But NATO is not the reason.
This is not about NATO expansion. This is about the democratic expansion.
Ukraine bans religious organizations.
We are protecting democracy right now.
Ukraine is banning political parties.
Because it's a democracy.
Ukraine restricts books and music.
It's about democracy.
Ukraine won't hold elections.
It's about democracy.
And it's not about NATO expansion.
This war in Ukraine is not about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
That's not about NATO.
It has nothing to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with NATO expansion.
It's not about NATO expansion.
Nothing to do with NATO. It isn't really about NATO. It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO enlargement. In fact, it has nothing to do with NATO.
It's not about NATO encroaching.
It's not about NATO. NATO is just the fictitious, imaginary adversary for Mr. Putin and for Russia.
It was never about NATO.
That's not what it's been about. It's been about him trying to expand his sphere of influence.
Hang on, I mean, the two are not mutually exclusive. Obviously, Russia has wished for a sphere of influence over Ukraine, but if the West had not challenged Russian interests so directly, I think that there was a chance to avoid this war.
He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. We rejected that.
The reason why Putin invaded Ukraine is because of his evil. It's about that Putin wants to rebuild Soviet empire of evil, like President Reagan told.
It's about Putin being sick.
I don't know how you negotiate peace with a madman, but
Nobody negotiated with Hitler.
People are comparing him to Hitler.
And remember Hitler.
He's a Hitler.
We're back when the Nazis invaded Poland.
This is exactly the same what Hitler was doing to Jews.
This is the same. Putin will not stop.
Putin is reminiscent of Hitler.
Hitler.
This reminds me of Hitler.
Hitler.
He's the new Hitler.
Well, Hitler.
This is about a butcher trying to kill people everywhere in the world, just not Ukraine, Syria, all over the place.
I hear you. Senator Lindsey Graham, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, friends, you've heard it. Listen, man, what we are looking at is Bible prophecy being fulfilled right before our eyes. Jesus says before he returns, there will be wars and famines and pestilences in diverse places. These are the things we are seeing right now. And also in Luke 21, about verse 25, there shall be signs in the suns and the moon and in the stars and upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and the waves warring. Men's hearts failing them for fear, for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Revelation 11 verse 18, the Bible says, the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead that should be judged, that thou shouldest give them reward unto thy servants the prophets, and the signs, and them that fear thy name, small and great, shouldest destroy them that destroy the earth. This will be a World War III if God does not intervene. We are told once again in the book Testimony for the Church, volume 9, page 11. We are told we are living in a time of the end. The fast fulfilling signs of the times declare that the coming of Christ is near at hand. The days in which we live are solemn and important. The Spirit of God is gradually and surely being withdrawn from the earth. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. The calamities by land and sea and unsettled state of society, the alarm of war. The alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of great magnitude. The agencies of evils are combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. The condition of things in the world show that the troublous times are right upon us. The daily papers are full of indication of terrible conflicts in the near future. Bold robberies are frequent occurrence. Strikes are common, thefts and murders are committing on every hand. Men possessed or demons are taking the lives of men, women, and little children. Men become infatuated with vice, and every species prevail. We are told once again, this is from Great Controversy 589, through spiritualism, Satan appears as a benefactor of the race, healing the diseases of the people and professing to present a new and more exalted system of religious faith. But at the same time, he works as a destroyer. His temptation are leading multitude to ruin. Intemperance dethrones reason. Sensual indulgence, strife, and bloodshed follow. Satan delights in war. What does he delight in? War, for it is excite the worst passions of the soul, and then sweeps into harvest his victim and step into vice and blood. It is his object to incite the nations to war against one another, for he can thus divert the mind of the people from the work of preparation to stand in the last days, in the day of God. One last one. We are reading from Education, page 179, paragraph 5. The present times of overwhelming interest up to all living. Rulers, statesmen, men who occupy position of trust and authority, thinking men and women of all classes, have their attention fixed upon the events taking place about us. They are watching the strained, restless relations that exist among the nations. They observe the intensity that is taking possession of every earthly element, and they recognize that something great and decisive is about to take place, and that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. Friends, this is a very serious situation that we are looking at, and I will say we need to pray in cooperation with the work that the Lord is doing in Revelation chapter 7, that I saw that the 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the tree, nor on any sea, until, for what reason? Until we've sealed the servants of our gods in their foreheads. And we are told, friends, the angels that are holding back the winds of strife, we need to say, Lord, hold back the winds. Let not the plans of the enemy prosper until we are ready, until we stay ready. But we know certain things are gonna take place so that the mark of the beast could be enforced and that we, God's people, could head home. Luke 21:27 tells us that then they shall see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory. Then these things, when you see these things begin to come to pass, the Bible says, then look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh.